Welcome to Blind Spots, a podcast where we're helping you fill the gap between what you want to do with your money and what you actually do. We are professional investors, writers, and financial planners helping you navigate the complexities of finance to optimize what you can control and cut out the rest. Join your host, Nick Shermans and Aaron Varghese, as we discuss the questions and nuances surrounding everyday money management. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our first episode of Blind Spots in 2024. We're excited to be back and in the hot seat talking about all things planning, investing, savings, and psychology of money.
What's your focus in 2024, Aaron?
My focus, I usually try to pick like words of the year that when I need to refocus, I kind of go back to them. So this year they are intentional and you already kind of said it, but focus. And just kind of honing in on the things that are important to me.
Where do you find yourself getting distracted?
I don't think that there's any one big distraction that I can point to, but I think the monotony of the day, like just kind of just flowing through everyday life and not stopping to smell the roses, so to speak, and like not making time for the things that are important to me can feel distracting. You know, like 2-3 weeks go by and I feel like I've been doing the same thing over and over, like I'm in the rat race, and it's just kind of my reminder to like step back, focus on the things that are important to me, and just be intentional with my time.
Yeah, that's all good stuff. And I think that's my favorite part of the holiday season, because I don't want to say the world stops, but a lot of our work stops. Our clients are with their family and friends, and kids come home from college, and it allows us, you know, for me, I've got 3 young kids and they're all at home and we're all together. We're playing board games and we're staying up a little later and we're spending a lot of our time together, which is great. The world definitely slows down. I'm not looking at my phone as much. The markets are essentially closed for a decent chunk of the break. So it's a great time to reflect, to breathe, to read, to connect. And it's become my favorite time of the year. But to your point, I think we can do more of that. Like we shouldn't need a holiday to recenter ourselves.
Or the turn of a calendar, but it is nice. It does feel good. You know, you leave last year behind, you step into the new one.
Sure.
You're not a big resolutions person or really like a goals person, but do you have any habits that you're looking to implement in this new year?
I've got a bunch. At the top of my list is getting rid of stuff. So one thing that we've come to know in my household is you accumulate a lot of stuff as your kids grow up and they're in different sports and they grow out of things, and their preferences for what they like changes. So you end up with a garage full of stuff. And then Christmas comes and they get more stuff and it becomes cluttered. And I started taking things to Goodwill and donating things. And that positive inertia of getting rid of stuff and simplifying can really energize you, because humans are a product of their environment. And when you're cluttered and disorganized and messy, I think that translates to your life and can provide some stress. But once you start getting rid of things, I understated or didn't understand the value in that. So that's what I'm focused on for the rest of this month. And then the rest is just reaffirming my habits, you know, working out, being mindful, staying off my phone when I'm at home with my kids, doing date night with my wife once a week, working out, focusing on my health. So those are all things that I think are good, not for one-time burst of inspiration, but to layer those daily habits and systems and behaviors into my routine.
That's good. That all sounds very positive and healthy. So in this episode, we are going to be talking about saving and investing and the attitudes that come along with those. So as the title says, save like a pessimist, invest like an optimist. So before we get into it, this is a quote from someone. Tell us who that is and where it came from.
This is a Morgan Housel quote. And for those that have heard me talk, he's the most talented business writer that I've ever encountered. And this is from his new book, Same as Ever. If you haven't read that book, I would encourage you to do it. I'm going to encourage our team to read it. It's tough to put it in words, but he has a gift to take the complex and make it simple. And this quote spoke to me: save like a pessimist, invest like an optimist. And I think this is an evergreen piece of advice. And I think it's more relevant now than ever, because, again, we're all hit with the information flow. And whether you're young, mid-career, or old, I think to sum up a sound financial principle that would apply to all of those age ranges would be save like a pessimist, invest like an optimist. And I can unpack what that means to me. The definition might be different for Aaron. It might be different for you. But again, simple beats complex. And I think a lot of times with money, investors from the novice, retail to professional make things more complex than it needs to be.
So let's start with the savings side of things. What does the save like a pessimist part mean to you?
Save like a pessimist.
And what is savings good for?
Save like a pessimist simply means you have a buffer, you have a margin of safety when your plan does not go according to plan. Now, some of us have riskier incomes, riskier sources of incomes than others. So like if you work off commission and your income is predicated on you going out and selling, that could potentially translate into having a bigger emergency fund, having more cash on hand to help smooth out some of the bumps. If you're a one income household, that would be deemed as more risky. You could make the case for having more cash on hand as opposed to a dual income household. If you have a short-term expense coming up, right? So say you're planning on buying a house, you're saving for a house, and you're going to buy that house in the next 1 to 12 months. You could make the case for hoarding cash and having more cash than you usually would. So saving like a pessimist, you're layering in your personal expenses, your circumstance, the sources of your income, and that cash number will change, but it's basically there as a buffer, as a margin of safety.
We saw last year, as we were talking about this episode and preparing for it, you mentioned that people went a little overboard with cash. Talk about what it might look like if you have a little bit too much of a safety net.
Yeah, so humans like certainty. There's nothing more certain than cash. And this was a paradigm shift, right? We went from 10 years of having zero rates, meaning you couldn't walk into your bank and get 4 or 5% on a CD, like they would have laughed you out of the building, to you could walk in pretty much anywhere and get 4 to 5% in your sleep. And in a world that feels like it's burning, cash provided comfort for a lot of folks. But to your point, Aaron, I think they overdid it. Cash is fine for the reasons that I mentioned. Cash is not a long-term investment strategy. Okay? So when I say people went overboard, they basically took long-term money that should have been invested and they parked it in cash. And while it might have felt good at the time, when you zoom out and you look at history, even when you look at 2023, taking money that should have been invested in equities or whatever your risk profile is, should have been invested in your long-term investment portfolio, and parking it in cash was a disastrous decision by any measure. Now, most people don't do that level of self-reflection, but if you look at what most asset classes returned last year, assuming you were in a reasonably balanced portfolio or owned equities of any flavor, cash was a disastrous decision.
So someone might hear save like a pessimist and think, well, I'm seeing in the media or on the news that all of these things are happening, so I want to be pessimistic and take advantage of the higher interest rates and guarantee myself 4 or 5%. So where does that thinking stop and turn into a long-term investment?
Okay, so let's invert that. What we don't want to be doing is jumping in and out of asset classes based on what rates are doing, based on what markets are doing. So I'm big on rules. I'm big on formula. I'm big on stripping emotion out of the investment process. So there's a couple easy ways to think about this. For anything short-term, like I mentioned, short-term expenses, you're buying a house, your income is volatile, one spouse loses their job. Sure, keep cash to help mitigate what could go wrong, the daily swings of life, right? That's your margin of safety, okay? Everything beyond that, just plow it into your long-term investment portfolio. Don't overthink it. Don't interrupt the compounding. Don't try to market time. Don't try to jump in and out of the market based on what you're reading or what your friends are doing, okay? Short-term, keep it in cash. Anything beyond a year or something that you might not need for 5, 10, 15 years, just go ahead and invest it in a portfolio that reflects the way you feel about risk, okay? That's the easiest, okay? The second thing you can do, and this is kind of in the same vein, if you're pessimistic right? You just happen to think things are going to get worse. That's fine. You can hedge yourself by buying some equities in case you're wrong. Okay. So, you can think the world's ending. You can read doomsday stuff. You can follow the doomsdayers on Twitter. In case you're wrong, you should buy some equities. Okay. If you're wrong, it might be a good thing because your equities went up in value, right? On the flip side, if you're a blind optimist, which if I'm going to err on one side, history has rewarded those that are optimistic, both in life and in investing. It's just a fact. But if you're a blind optimist and you find yourself wanting to take on leverage or speculate, you can hedge yourself in case you're wrong by parking some money in cash, by parking some money in a CD or short-term treasuries. So there's ways to offset our natural dispositions in case we're wrong. And in general, most people would be better off not hanging out on the extreme, on the fringes. Try to balance it out, not being too optimistic or too pessimistic.
So you kind of went into the invest like an optimist section. Well,
invest like an optimist simply means invest the money. Don't overthink it. Market's up, invest it. Market's flat, invest it. Market's down, invest it, especially if you're not going to touch the money for 10, 15, or 20 years. When someone tells me, I want to keep this in cash, things are going to get worse, you're basically putting up your middle finger to 100 plus years of empirical evidence. Right? Markets go up roughly 75% of the time. 20% of the time they go down. 5% of the time things get really weird, like a 2008. Okay? If you're refusing that evidence, I would tell you, one, engage more with history, less in predictions, and lean into probabilities. Like you're fighting a current and you're derailing your own plan. Like again, I've said this in the past. I'm stumbling across more 40-somethings and 30-somethings that refuse to invest. And to me, that's the most catastrophic mistake that you can make. You're basically saying that you're smarter than everyone out there. You're smarter than history. The world's going to end. The world can only end one time. Okay? So be careful of what you're wishing for and what you're doing, because these decisions, they seem free. There's very much a cost to them.
So something that has started to come up recently, just comments that I've heard from clients, is the election's right around the corner. I think things are going to continue to be volatile through that, and it doesn't matter what side of the universe they're swinging on. Everyone kind of says the same thing. So what do you say to those people?
I'm really confused when people tell me, oh, it's uncertain out there right now. It's volatile out there. There's a lot going on out there. Tell me a period of time that the market just said, hey, nothing to see here. There's no risk out there. You have a green light to go ahead and print money. It doesn't exist. To get 8% a year, the S&P average, volatility, uncertainty, things that could go wrong are all the cost of admission. It's not a quirk. It's not a glitch. The system isn't broken. It's simply the cost of admission. Okay? Embrace it. Embrace history. Again, 20%, 25% of the time, the market's going to go down. But most of the time, this sounds aloof. It sounds boring. I sound like a complete idiot ignoring all the risk out there. But the market wants to go up. That's a fact of the matter. Look at 2022 to 2023. Everyone thought the world was ending in 2022. It was a very difficult year. I wrote a blog post somewhere in the middle of 2022, silver linings in a dismal year. And a basic premise of that was good years in markets are often preceded by ugly years and uncomfortable years. What happened in 2023? The market went up. That was not some outlier or weird thing that happened. Going back to history, that usually is a precursor, a difficult year, to a pretty good year. Of course, you can't set your watch to it, but again, when you start to think in probabilities, you engage with history, all of this becomes more simple. You ignore all the noise. There's always something that could go wrong. Like if you asked an average person on the street what could go wrong versus what could go right, the former list would fly off their tongue. Okay, because you can see it. It's headlines. Stuff is happening. Bad stuff happens. It's on the front page of the news. Progress you don't see. It's slow. It's invisible. It doesn't really make sense at the time. Okay, all of this is normal when you engage with history. Okay, we should be less surprised by surprises and uncertainty. It's part of investing. It's part of the game.
One of my favorite charts, and I think you've shared it in a recent market commentary, is I think it looks at the last, 70 years or something, and all of the big headlines that have happened throughout history and all of the ebbs and flows of the market. It's just really fascinating to see. In any one of these scenarios, you would think, kind of like you said, the world was ending, but that can only happen one time. And the upward trajectory that the market has continued to follow throughout the years, despite all of these kind of catastrophic events. Just a really neat kind of visual to put.
Well, I'm
put
about
life
to
into
film our
perspective.
market commentary, recapping 2023 and looking at 2024. And I've got one of those graphs in 2023. So it has all of the headlines. And I think just 2023, and actually the graph is pretty cool, but it leaves stuff out. Like there was so much going on in 2023. Like I call it the year of the narrative. There were so many narratives. Like think how ridiculous. This was back in the spring or summer. People were like, the dollar is going to get replaced. The dollar is going to lose out to the Chinese currency, yada. The dollar as a percentage of global trade, its usage has never been higher right now. How ridiculous was that conversation? And I was having it over and over again. These narratives, they sound intoxicating. They sound smart. People don't understand. Engagement rules the day now. Opens, clicks, engagement, views. People can say whatever the hell they want and get and monetize that. They don't care about your outcome. They don't care that you sold everything and you were scared out of your wits, right? They don't care about any of that. They want you to get sucked into the vortex.
So you have a really great example of how this plays out in real life and how pessimism sells, like you said, with clicks and likes and engagement. And that is evidenced by these two creators, one on YouTube and one on X. I hate saying X, Twitter. So tell us about that.
A Twitter friend that I follow, he's a analyst for some regional bank or something like that. And this guy has put out some pretty good content, and he tends to lean on the optimistic side. But he's using historical evidence to suggest that, again, bad years often followed by good years. When investment sentiment is in the dumps, future returns are pretty good. And he's made some pretty good, I don't even want to call them calls because he's not making hot take calls, but he's just pointing out that things are likely to get better before they get worse. And looking at his tweets in 2023, he's been pretty spot on, okay? He's getting frustrated because his Twitter, his YouTube channel aren't getting the traction that he thought he should be getting based on his track record. He's called it pretty good. His views, his followers have maintained pretty flat. So that's frustrating to him. He shows another YouTube channel. This guy's predicting doom and gloom, banking failures, U.S. currency collapse, U.S. government collapse, political upheaval, the crashing of markets. This guy's been wrong. This YouTube channel, the Pessimist channel, the Doomsday channel, has been wrong for 7 years straight. Anyone following his advice would have been absolutely wrecked and ruined. This guy's views, clicks, opens, and followers have shot through the roof. And I think that's a really good example that people love pessimism. They love a good train wreck. If I tell you everything's going to be okay, the market's likely to go up 3 out of 4 years, I come off as checked out, aloof, maybe even stupid in your eyes. But if I lean in and tell you, hey, man, I got a secret. The banking system's going to crash next quarter. This is how it's going to happen. And I lay out this elaborate scheme of how things get worse. You lean in. You think I'm brilliant. It sounds sophisticated. It sounds smart. People don't understand. When you're using social media and you don't have a filter, you are the product. They are selling you. You are being monetized. The more outlandish things they say, the more you get sucked in. So you have to have a filter. You have to be aware of all this. The incentive system is working against you. And if you're not mindful of this, it likely could show up in your behavior, your investment portfolio, and it doesn't end well.
Well, I think that example is as good as any that you could use for this topic. So the message is keep it simple, save like a pessimist, and kind of fully fund the emergency fund, if all things go to hell in a handbasket, I'm good. But everything over and above that, invest as though you are an optimist and that all of those doom and gloom content that's coming your way does not exist.
That's right.
Because we make data-backed decisions here. So if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us at insight@pureportfolios.com, and we will see you in the next one.